Envision a world where the quest isn't for material wealth, pleasure, perfection, and ignorance, but rather for the highest levels of tranquility and liberation from the unending cycles of suffering caused by human desire. This is what the Buddha sought out to learn and share. But what if the ancient path to inner peace has been co-opted into a tool for modern-day escapism? Originating in South Asia around 5th century BCE, Buddhism emerged as a profound response to life's most challenging mysteries. Buddhism is a faith founded by Siddhartha Gautama, later known as the Buddha. It is recognized to be one of the world's major religions that are still practiced today. While most faiths revolve around deities and gods, Buddhism treads a unique path. It doesn't conform to or worship a deity, but there are supernatural figures guiding or obstructing the way. It is by nature one of the many non-theistic traditions of thought. With its core focus on personal enlightenment or nirvana, some scholars argue whether to call Buddhism a religion at all. Could it be better termed a philosophy or a moral code? Ultimately, the Buddhist teachings and practices were born from Siddhartha Gautama's quest for enlightenment. However, Siddhartha's divine teachings have become recklessly distorted and misunderstood by a large majority of the New Age Western culture. We'll examine whether Buddhism, particularly its mindfulness practices, is a genuine pathway to experiencing true nirvana, or is it a justification for emotional and psychological avoidance and detachment? This is Buddhism Explained. Founded in ancient South Asia over 2,500 years ago, Buddhism was born from Siddhartha Gautama's quest for enlightenment. At its core, it teaches the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, a guideline for ethical and mental development. Followers believe escaping the constant cycle of suffering and rebirth that human beings experience is the true path to your soul's liberation. The journey to enlightenment, also known as nirvana, is the secret to escaping the cycle for eternity. One in this awakened state is known to have achieved Buddhahood, having found the path of cessation of dukkha, or suffering, and is referred to as Buddha. The rich tapestry of Buddhism is woven from three primary threads: Mahayana, Theravada, and Vajrayana. Mahayana thrives in places like China, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, shining a spotlight on bodhisattvas, enlightened souls who come back to guide us as living inspirations. Theravada, on the other hand, finds its home in countries like Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Thailand, Laos, and Burma. Here, the path to enlightenment is paved with deep meditation and a life devoted to spiritual discipline. Meanwhile, in the highlands of Tibet, Nepal, Bhutan, and Mongolia, Vajrayana Buddhism promises a quicker journey to enlightenment compared to its Mahayana and Theravada counterparts. So, it is said, the tale begins with a young man named Siddhartha Gautama. He was raised in an affluent family as a sheltered, wealthy prince. His father was made aware of a prophecy that he would become a religious leader rather than take over the throne. Siddhartha's father made efforts to avoid him witnessing all forms of human suffering, such as sickness, old age, and ugliness in the world, including death. Eventually, Siddhartha then felt as though his existence was hollow, meaningless, and he was heavily dissatisfied. So he sought to figure out what it is he was missing. Once he was permitted to go on a trip on his own, he witnessed what his father had been hiding from him all along: sickness, old age, and death. And of course, this then sent him to a deep existential crisis very quickly. Later on, Siddhartha then went on another trip outdoors, and during this adventure he came across a homeless monk who had given up all of his possessions. He wondered what this kind of life would be like, so he abandoned his comforts as a prince, turning his back on a life of luxury. He wandered as a simple beggar, lost in thought and endless travel, choosing to live alongside the monk to find an answer to life's suffering. He chose to learn from India's greatest meditation masters for about 6 years until he found himself drawn to practicing the austerities and self-mortifications practiced by the group of hermits. Here is when he put into practice the most excessive form of fasting and meditation. But Siddhartha then became extremely emaciated. Still, something was missing. He was suffering, and this is when he realized something. He stumbled upon the idea that he termed the middle way. This he concluded to be the truest path to enlightenment all along. It was a simple yet powerful insight. True wisdom wasn't found in giving everything up, nor in having it all, but in a balanced life between the two extremes. A centered journey through experiencing his initial extravagance and comforts as a prince, and his starvation and difficulty as a nomad. He vowed to sit and meditate beneath the Bodhi tree until he discovered the secret to end life's suffering. In this life-changing moment, while deeply lost in meditation under the Bodhi tree, also known as the Tree of Awakening, he found what he'd been searching for, a state of pure peace and enlightenment, also known as nirvana. Thus, Buddhism was born. The Mahabodhi temple in Bihar, India, the site of his enlightenment, is now a major Buddhist pilgrimage site. It is also very interesting to note there is another leader of the Buddhist faith known as the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama stands as the guiding light in the world of Tibetan Buddhism, seen by his followers as a reborn Lama, a spiritual leader who has chosen to return to Earth to aid humanity. He is a lineage that stretches back through 14 distinct incarnations. The present Dalai Lama, who not only spearheads Tibetan Buddhism but also historically governed Tibet, was forced to flee to India in 1959 to escape the clutches of Chinese rule. Today, he and many Tibetan Buddhists continue to challenge China's hold over their homeland. Adding another layer of complexity, the current Dalai Lama has recently stirred intrigue by musing openly about the possibilities and even the location of his future reincarnation. Basically, on some level, he is questioning it. In practice, Buddhism has many tenets. These are the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Buddha shared a roadmap to end human suffering encapsulated in the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. The Four Noble Truths serve as a guide, illuminating the reasons for human pain and the path to rise above it. The Eightfold Path, in turn, lays out a set of principles that focus on ethical living, mental discipline, and the pursuit of wisdom as the way to transcend suffering. The Four Noble Truths unfold as follows. Suffering, dukkha. The first truth suggests that suffering is an unavoidable part of human existence. Origin of suffering, samudaya. It teaches that the root of all suffering lies in desire or craving. Cessation of suffering, nirodha. This hopeful truth claims that suffering can, in fact, be ended, opening the door to enlightenment. Path to the cessation of suffering, magga. The final truth lays out the middle way, outlining the steps one must follow to achieve enlightenment. As for the Eightfold Path, it consists of right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. These steps are categorized further under three main themes. Good moral conduct. This includes right understanding, right thought, and right speech. Meditation and mental development, covered under this theme, are right action, right livelihood, and right effort. Wisdom or insight. This final theme encompasses right mindfulness and right concentration. Furthermore, Buddhist practices like meditation, chanting, reading scriptures, mantra recitation, etc., aim to cultivate mindfulness and compassion, tools to navigate the complex maze of human existence. Now comes the core issues of seeking enlightenment and spiritual awakening. Through the development of a plethora of ancient Eastern mystical practices, there grew a chronically online community of awakened ones, the self-proclaimed star children, transcending our three-dimensional reality and crossing the Phoenix Rising portal, entering the 5D, the psychonauticians, etc. I'm not saying delving deep into mindfulness practices and self-affirming using an array of beautiful strings of words is the worst thing in existence. No. I too am a very self-proclaimed magical something. Lol. What I'm here to critique is the flaws in blissfully ignorant positive thinking. It's not only unhealthy for your soul, it is extremely dangerous and deceptive. This way of being not only impacts the individual, it's an evil betrayal of the collective consciousness. It is the most harmful spiritual escapism that seems to have been amplified by the Western world's fascination with partaking in trends. This is spiritual gentrification. This is a blind faith in something you do not truly understand, for if it was truly understood, there would be no need to bypass in the first place. In the digital sphere, this came to be during the rise in popularity of the book The Secret, which then gave way to abuse of the concept of manifestation, or what we know as the law of attraction. The basic premise is that what you are, what you think, and what you like attracts and brings forth your reality and your circumstances. As you can already tell, this practice is incredibly flawed. The term spiritual bypassing was reintroduced as an explanation of this phenomenon. It is the act of using spiritual beliefs to avoid dealing with emotional and real-world issues, also termed toxic positivity. This behavior can make mindfulness more of an escape hatch than a path to genuine well-being. It is utilizing spirituality to gaslight oneself and others instead of facing the realities of a situation. One common theme that I've noticed is that the most privileged people in our society are often the ones who spiritually bypass the most, due to the fact that they've never had to face struggles or obstacles in their lives to begin with. Originally coined around the 1980s by John Welwood, a Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist, after he observed this behavior in spiritual communities at the time. He said, "I noticed a widespread tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, and unfinished developmental tasks. When we are spiritually bypassing, we often use the goal of awakening or liberation to rationalize what I call premature transcendence, trying to rise above the raw and messy side of our humanness before we have fully faced and made peace with it. And then we tend to use absolute truth to disparage or dismiss relative human needs, feelings, psychological problems, relational difficulties, and developmental deficits. I see this as an occupational hazard of the spiritual path. In some spiritual communities, this way of thinking and behaving seems to heavily discourage an open, honest expression of what is deemed negative emotionally. I find this an unfortunate disease that has been plaguing a practice that is sacred, loving, and passionate. To condemn anyone, yourself included, because you perceive a lack of wakefulness is only a sign that you yourself still have a long journey to awakening ahead of you. This judgment goes against the true purpose of the thing which you are practicing. It's almost hypocritical. It's as though in today's world we have become so intolerant, more so than ever. And this is evident in the New Age wave of spirituality. We resist coming across as deficient, so then we portray a falsified sainthood. While traditional mindfulness is about being fully present, today's digitized versions often serve as mere coping mechanisms for our fast-paced lives, sometimes missing the deeper ethical aspects. Spiritual self-delusion is not the way. Engaging with mystical experiences is not by any means easy and filled with never-ending beauty and perfection. The core purpose of Buddhahood, if it was truly understood, is to not cloak oneself with idealistic fabrications, but to own up to the fullness of the complexities of the self, the other, and the universe in its entirety. Ultimately, this is not a realism versus idealism debate. This is a discussion for a centered approach to spirituality and existence itself. Neither extreme end of the spectrum is to humanity's detriment. So what do you think? Are Buddhist teachings and other mystic practices the path to true inner peace, or have they become entangled in the web of modern day spiritual bypassing? I think the answer may lie in how we apply these ancient teachings in our modern day context. I implore you to reflect on how you have been applying these sacred teachings in your own day-to-day practice. Remember, we are all just humans. To strive for the perfect way of being is to cause yourself so much suffering. Once we acknowledge and accept that at the end of the day, we all face struggles and adversities, and this indeed is okay and shameless, only then can we ever find true happiness in this life. Please do boop the subscribe button, leave comments of anything you'd like me to cover in the future. Hekate loves you, unicorns. I wish you a magical existence. Thank you.